This is Jonathan Ferguson, the Keeper of Firearms and Artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK, which houses a collection of thousands of iconic weapons from throughout history. And this week, he's taking a look at the weapons from the winner of our most recent poll, the Half-Life franchise.
Now, the elephant in the room is always an underbarrel grenade launcher on a submachine gun. That's absurd. The MP5 made lots of sense. The grenade launcher made almost no sense until I came to the Royal Armouries and met this.
If you like this kind of content, we've got a brand new season of Loadout airing on the channel, and you can check out our most recent episode about the history and pop culture impact of the M16 right now. Right, let's take a look at the iconic weapons from Half-Life.
So, first gun up is the Glock. Fond memories of using this. I think it's the first game I ever played, or definitely the first game I ever played to try to replicate a Glock. And if we look at a real Generation 2 Glock 17, you can clearly see that's what they're going for, despite the limitations of the graphics. We've even got the point on the front of the trigger guard here, bottom edge. General blocky shape, of course, is iconically Glock. So I wouldn't be surprised if they haven't taken a photo of a Glock and de-resed it and wrapped it onto the actual model. Minor quirk of the Glock in the game, and I think they did this just because they could, so they weren't just inserting a black square into a black square, is the magazine. So the real Glock magazine. That really is just, apparently, from the outside, a lump of plastic. The mag in the game is very skinny and has windows in it. It looks a lot like a Makarov magazine, funnily enough, which has a very long witness window so you can see how many rounds you have left. Probably the main departure from the actual Glock design.
Power 40%.
Okay, that's a surprise. I did not expect a locker with my name on it and a picture of me in it in Half-Life. There's even a very low poly copy of my book. That's very cool.
Well, you get points for trying.
All right, so we've got Black Mesa. The fan remake, remember rightly, of the Glock next, and it is way more Glocky, safe to say. Got lots of detail, like the whereas there's just like a square inset in the back of the slide on the original engine version of the game. This has the ribbed polymer backplate of a real Glock with the different shapes. The U-shaped version of the rear sight that's on this Gen 2 Glock. And it's modeled better, it acts more realistically, the magazines look like Glock magazines, it's just better all around, really. Right, we're into Half-Life 2. The pistol's been replaced by an H&K USP Match. This is not a pistol, unlike the Glock from the original game, that would have just been lying around. It's a specialist competition variant of not a hugely Gucci pistol, but the one with the competition muzzle weight / comp on the end of it is pretty Gucci. So a little bit surprising, and it's not something you're going to keep finding in this environment. If you found one, that would be it, and you'd be finding different guns. It's pretty good. The recoil seems excessive. Shouldn't really be jumping around as much as it is. In terms of the detail of the model, I don't have one to show you, but it should be cut away. There should be a U-shaped channel in the compensator, the big chunky bit hanging off the front of the gun, so that the barrel, which has to recoil to operate the gun, isn't impeded, and also it doesn't affect the accuracy by contacting the barrel of the pistol. So it sits around the barrel like this. It's open on the top. It's not on this version, probably because they only had side profile images to work from. The Half-Life shotgun, simultaneously one of the most satisfying shotguns in a video game and one of the more irritating for gun nerds, because, as I'm sure some of you know, it's pretty much a SPAS 12, very, very closely based, for the graphics of the time anyway, on that gun. And inexplicably, it fires its alternate fire double barrel shot out of the magazine tube. This is a closed off tube. It houses your shotgun cartridges. It's how they go backwards into the action, forwards into the chamber, and get fired. Standard tube fed shotgun arrangement for a very non-standard, convertible from pump to semi-automatic exotic shotgun. It's conventional in the sense of the magazine tube. Developers either didn't know or didn't care how shotguns worked, and so they went, oh, 2 tubes. May as well give it 2 shots. But when you're actually playing the game, it's pretty damn satisfying to loose off the double barrel. So they wanted to have their cake and eat it too. As far as the actual model goes, it's not as close to the SPAS 12 as I remember. I mean, it has the double tube. It has the pretty close shape of the forend. The rest of it is a little bit far removed, actually. They've kind of foreshortened the whole gun so that the bolts and ejection port area on the receiver is shunted forward into the heat shield area, and basically this whole bit is missing. This bit shunted forward. The whole design is changed up. Interesting. I've not seen the gun fired from a third-person view side on like that. And when the double barrels are fired, there is markedly more recoil animated into the gun. You have the doubled up sound effect, sounds very impressive, devastating effect on the target, and the gun rising up to imply power. So I've not played Black Mesa, and I've not seen their take on the shotgun. It's substantially closer to the SPAS 12. Proportions are more correct. The shape of the whole thing is more correct. It's got the release catch on this side modeled in as well. I think what they've done is model a SPAS 12, but to make it fit the aesthetic of Half-Life, where it's not quite the same gun, they've added in attachment to the upper receiver, which is also giving it a rail on the top. We've still got the same double shot for alt fire. I don't know if they've tried to model the magazine tube with an open muzzle as though it is a second barrel. They obviously didn't want to change the gameplay too much, so we still have our alt fire. Nice touch in the recoil is that not only are we seeing more recoil, it's actually coming out of the support hand, which really emphasizes that you're firing an awful lot of lead down range. Oh, this was an incredibly cool weapon in 1998. I think it still is. That's a pretty massive prod. The actual arms on the bow, they look pretty substantial, and the effect on the enemies implies something relatively powerful. Any crossbow you can cock by just pulling back on the string isn't going to be hugely powerful. You can ramp up the power with cams, which aren't on this. Strips of what look to be steel and then some sort of composite. You'd have a job to do that. Traditional crossbows, one in particular, the Chinese repeating crossbow. So in that case, you could cock it by hand without using a windlass or a Kranikin, and it has a magazine of quarrels, just like this does, only it feeds using gravity from the top. For this to work the way this does, it would need to replicate what a firearm does with a spring. Not impossible, but the Chinese did it with gravity feed, which makes a lot of sense considering it just needs to drop onto the groove. Forgive me, I'm not a curator of archery. The scope, I guess, gave this a bit more of a sort of modern tactical feel, and obviously affects the gameplay directly as well. Quite a straightforward upgrade for Black Mesa. They have put those cams in on the prod there to, I guess, modernize it a bit. But otherwise, the design is pretty close to the original. Bolts look, funnily enough, more like they might be explodey, but they're not. They're just the physics of the game, I guess, different engine, have them knock the target back with a hell of a lot of force. Far too much force, it has to be said. Although a crossbow bolt or quarrel or an arrow is quite a massive object compared to most bullets, it still doesn't have enough mass to physically knock you down, and certainly knock you head over heels like that. And it's traveling way slower than a bullet as well. Okay, this rendition, this is Half-Life 2. Crossbow is looking, well, very different design-wise. It looks to be entirely homemade. It has the scope of the original, but we've lost the magazine. We're now single loading some sort of metal rod that is being superheated by, I guess, a battery or capacitor or something that's on the weapon. well, I don't know why you're superheating a projectile. Heating up a projectile doesn't really achieve very much, but it certainly looks cool, sounds cool, and the ability to pin the enemies to the background looks like a lot of fun. I have to say, it really looks very, very powerful, very effective, limited by the reduced capacity over the original. Right, so although I'm MP5 obsessed, as some of you know, probably my favourite gun in the original Half-Life game was the Magnum. This is the Python. I mean, I'm not sure the graphics are quite good enough to be able to say for sure which precise model it is, but for me it was a Python. Don't think I was aware of the Colt Anaconda at the time. This should be about the right barrel length. Obviously 6-shot, double action, really punchy sound effects, high damage. It's not been sort of fudged in the design, so it has the Colt classic pullback and the shape of the cylinder latch, the shape of the trigger guard, the barrel shroud. It's all very Colt, and it functions, pretty much like it ought to do. Just a great video game gun. There's not much I can say about it. I've no real criticisms. Certainly not for the time. Okay, here's one. The way the rear sight's depicted as being part of the frame and very open at the back is not right. Revolver sights for these guns, okay, the notch is quite wide because the front sight is proportionately wide. But if there's a compromise made, it's probably with that. Now, with a graphical overhaul, we get a closer rendition, although the top strap, if this is still a Python, the top strap is not the right shape, but this, the rear sight being an insert that's, well, the real gun is adjustable, obviously not on the virtual one, but the configuration is closer to reality. We do have what looks like an axis pin for the hammer that doesn't exist, it's not visible on the left side of the real gun. It is on the right side. In fact, yeah, looking at that, we have two pins that have been, I guess, probably mirrored on both sides of the frame, and then the latch has just been put on one side. So a slight compromise. It does have the night sight, or the high vis, I should say, plastic insert on the front sight blade, and it has glowing, presumably tritium dots on the rear sight, which you could replicate on this by changing out the rear sight. This has the standard U-shaped white notch. We have an aiming with sights option, which is very nice. Couldn't do that with the original game. And I see now that in fact both sides of the gun are mirrored. So there's a cylinder latch and these pins that only appear on one only appears on the left side, the other only appears on the right side on both sides. A common labor and time saving device to just mirror both sides of the gun, because who's going to care? Really nice animation of flicking out the cylinder, which I won't do on this because I don't want to damage the gun in any way. That's cool. All the animation, the reload animation is way superior, of course. However, it does not show operating the cylinder latch in order to open the cylinder. It's just flick it out, put it back in. Minor realism issue there. Getting very, very nerdy here, but for the most part, Colt revolvers rotate their cylinder clockwise, as from the point of view of the user. See that happening there. And Smith & Wesson rotate counterclockwise. And although this is supposed to be a Colt, it's rotating the Smith & Wesson way around. And I think that might be the nerdiest gun comment I've made. I'm sure I've made nerdier. Okay, so I think I'm getting my chronology slightly mixed up in that Black Mesa comes after Half-Life 2 as a remake of Half-Life 1. So the revolver in Black Mesa is based on the one in Half-Life 2 that I'm now looking at. What we have got in Half-Life 2 that we didn't in Black Mesa is a nod toward the cylinder latch. However, they're pushing it like with the Smith & Wesson rather than pulling it as in the Colt system. this is a quirky bit of video game gun history in that when I first played Half-Life, the iconic MP5 with underbarrel grenade launcher was perhaps the most memorable weapon in the game. Now, the elephant in the room is always an underbarrel grenade launcher on a submachine gun. That's absurd. The MP5 made lots of sense. The grenade launcher made almost no sense until I came to the Royal Armouries and met this. Saw it on the wall and just almost literally boggled that somebody had made a launcher for an MP5. I think I then tried to rationalize it and go, oh, it must be a flare launcher. Nope, this is... I mean, it may not just have been for lethal purpose, but primarily it's a 40mm grenade launcher for an MP5, almost identical to the Half-Life gun. So this is incredibly cool. This was made by a UK company called Istech and was sort of shopped around along with a version for full-length rifles. And long story short, or not very long story shorter, still wasn't successful. Wasn't sold as far as I know. There's no firing mechanism modeled on the gun, if I remember rightly. But on the real thing, you have to reach under here. And it is a double action trigger, which is pretty common for UGLs. So there we are. The Half-Life MP5 kind of exists. If you'd like to find out more about this, we will have Royal Armouries What Is This Weapon video up by now, where you can get a little bit more information on this. Our remade MP5. So having had, I think it was Blue Shift, retcon the MP5 into a different gun, we have, in this remake, gone back to the MP5. Great, love the MP5. We've got a Picatinny rail forend that's also adapted to take what must be a truncated version of the M203. We've got a full set of reload animations that were missing from the original game. We've got not the HK slap. We have the flick it out of the knot with your thumb approach, which is okay. And we see Gordon reach into the trigger guard of the grenade launcher to actually fire it. Something I've just seen there that I think was also true of the original game is that the grenades come flying out of the barrel, tumbling. In reality, this, the M203 and this are both rifled. If you can see the rifling in the bore there, and it flies. It's a giant, essentially, the 40 by 46 grenade round is a giant cartridge. So it should fly straight and true because it's spinning in that way. It's not tumbling through the air. If that's happening, something's gone horribly wrong with your launcher and you're not going to have the accuracy you need to try to place the round. All right, this is wacky as heck for someone like me who hasn't played Half-Life 2. However, I have two confused observations. Firstly, and most confusingly, how the hell is this launching a grenade? At least the MP5 had a launcher modelled onto it in Half-Life 1. There's nowhere for a grenade to come out of, so I've no idea. I must be missing something, I think. I'll try and keep an eye out. And the other thing is the shape of the thing. The pistol grip is too far back. And that's what we have here. It's pretty close to an MP7, but the whole pistol grip with the magazine is all the way back here, which means there's no room for the bolt to actually reciprocate and feed rounds. It could not work, which is weird because there's a lot of detail from the MP7 on this model. So they've modeled this from life, as it were. In fact, you can see when it's shut, the arms of the stock are modeled alongside the gun. There is this hint of a second barrel under the main barrel, but it's nowhere near big enough for a grenade round. Really quite a curious gun.
60. Power 75. 90%.
Now this brings back a lot of memories. The original Half-Life rocket launcher, extremely cool in just about every way, including the quite faithful representation of a recoilless weapon with a rocket-assisted projectile, where so you have that launch from an expelling charge and then the rocket motor firing off. Obviously somewhat cartoony by real-life standards, but kind of how they actually work. I didn't automatically know this, but someone else quite rightly has identified, well, I think rightly, has identified this, the armbrust launcher, which is a recoilless weapon. Looks a heck of a lot like the Half-Life launcher, mainly in this front end, but also in a few other design cues. I think it's safe to say that somebody spotted this in, I don't know, a copy of Jane's Infantry Weapons or something, and based the launcher on this, because it's not particularly well known. The Black Mesa remake is pretty much fitting the theme of all the others. It's the same basic weapon enhanced. There's a little display screen. I didn't see that doing anything. Just more detail overall, really. No change to functionality. They haven't tried to make it more like an armbrust. I think it might lose a little bit of punch in the way they've sort of moderated the delay. It's not quite as satisfying. I'm doing impressions of weapons on camera now. Half-Life 2's rocket launcher, we've got some changes here. Looks more like an AT4. Equipment hanging underneath is to do with the laser guidance. I'm not sure what still not sure what the big green cylinder is there for. But the main thing up front there is your grip stock. It's not a million miles away from this setup on the inspiration for the original Half-Life weapon. But they've done, I guess, a better job of showing you where your laser guidance system is. Although the main cleverness there would have to be built into the warhead to be able to communicate with the weapon and steer onto target, which is, in broad terms, a real functionality that exists for anti-tank weapons. Well, there isn't much expertise I can bring to bear on the Angry Alien B gun, which I remember pretty clearly from the original game. I don't remember, or possibly never even realised that this was actually, well, it's obviously the arm of an alien, effectively, but I didn't realise that you were shoving your own hand up the arm. It's a little bit David Cronenberg, seen in profile, attached to your arm like that. This is a really weird one. I'd heard of the Combine Assault Rifle, never actually seen it in use. So this is a first. It's really strange. So it's got a sort of motorized, like a tank autoloader system to get around, more of a magazine really, into the chamber or straight into the barrel. I don't know. And then it's hugely bulky at the back, and yet all the action's happening at the front. It's like the mullet of video game guns. And then some sort of massive firing pin is just slapping the back of the magazine thing, and it then sounds like and works basically like a normal rifle. Kind of exciting and disappointing all at the same time. But the disappointment is obliterated when the alt fire is used, and it's not clear to me where that's coming from. It's a separate ammunition pool, which then bounces around the room and vaporizes stuff, and you kind of go, ah, there's the Half-Life. All right, we are back to a game that I have played, albeit only about a third of. I was quite surprised that the gun was really old school in terms of being a 1911 pattern handgun with some weird future changes. I think something I did appreciate about the route this game took with the handgun is that you're almost replicating the experience of a movie armorer, certainly one from the 80s, 90s, where they're taking a base gun, in this case a 1911, and then they're disguising it with sci-fi stuff. Where in this game you start with pretty much a 1911 with a couple of bells and whistles, and then you are making those changes to make it more sci-fi. So I don't think that's what they were trying to go for, but it's a frame of reference that I bring to the table, and I thought it was quite a cool aspect. The shotgun or shot pistol is really odd in this game. A lot of thought's gone into the look of it. It's quite industrial, but sci-fi at the same time sort of look. The mechanism for breaking it open. It's kind of weird that a shotgun like this would break open. I don't think there's any reasonable way in which this could feed and work. We've got a slightly weird double load. I'm sure you've seen, certainly in John Wick, multiple rounds being loaded in one go. So you hold 2 or even 4 in your hand and shove them all into the tube. And here we've got Alyx holding 2 like a syringe and shoving them into the magazine that way. I think I understand the in-game justification for having this be such a short, weird shotgun with such a weird mechanism, and that is that they've made the decision to make all the weapons one-handed, so that you've always got a free hand to interact with other stuff in VR, and you're not constrained by having to sort of lock your hands together to aim a two-handed gun. I must admit, as an enthusiast of these things, I would prefer to be able to have the two-handed aiming experience. Right, those were the guns of the Half-Life series. I hope you enjoyed those. I know I did. As always, there are ways that you can support the work that we do here at the Royal Armouries Museum. We have our various social media outlets and our own YouTube channel, which includes a fair bit of yours truly, as does an event coming up on the 11th of March, where you can actually, depending on which ticket you purchase, see our website or social media for details. You can actually come and say hello to me. Whatever you do, join us again next time for another one of these.